I took a detour out of my schedule to play BloodBorne PSX. It's a project I've glanced at for a while, and it's finally playable. I'm more and more impressed with fans and indie games. Independent projects used to be horrid. For a good moment, people thought me insane because I said I hated indie games a couple of years ago. I used to play them when they were nothing more than homages to 8-bit games, specifically Mario. I thought this trend would never end. Indies seemed like they would never be more than the never-ending nostalgia dream of hipsters in their mid-30s who finally grew up and learned to program. However, around 2012 those games evolved and now we have projects like BloodBorne PSX. The window for what is considered nostalgic has changed. We're still in the VHS 80s wave, but now we're allowing in the late 90s. This isn't the first game to introduce the use of PS1 models. Just a fun observation, it seems that the use of that style is mostly used in horror and horror-themed games. Maybe the fact that PS1 visuals are so hard to make out help in establishing a horror atmosphere. For a good moment, I hated this wave. It didn't work well like black and white in movies or 2D games, mostly for two reasons. The first one being that there wasn't something to make with early 3D, it just seemed like a limitation. 2D games can exaggerate motion, so can 2D movies. On the other hand, the lack of color in the film can establish a mood. Imagine Casablanca, or any detective movie or film noir. Secondly, early 3D falls in that valley of technological advancement. As a new technology is introduced, it lacks finesse. After a certain amount of time, it's mastered and you forget about the limitations because most have been circumvented. Then, as new technology is introduced, it suffers from the lack of mastery and the roughness of the early stages of development. Let me clarify. Early 2D games look rough. Games like Pitfall or E.T. You can hardly tell what you're looking at. As the technology advances, you get games on the NES or SNES. Super Mario, Super Metroid. The technology has been mastered. You know what you're looking at. Early 3D games, N64, PS1, they look amazing at first, but you notice the limitations as the technology advances. The uncanny valley forms. When late 3D games come out, you realize the lack of detail these early outings had. When games start modeling individual strands of eyebrows, you can't help but notice how little was actually being done. Early 2D games would be like painting on a cave wall like a Neanderthal. Late 2D games would be akin to painting on a beautiful white canvas. And early 3D is similar to spray painting a brick wall in a rough neighborhood. You can tell the homeless urinated on that wall. Later 3D entries like Soul Calibur 2 were not too close to reality, but close enough that you could tell what they were going for. It's not too realistic and still stylized. Earlier games did not convey much, but now they do. I don't think it's a coincidence that the style has made a comeback mostly within horror. The limit of draw distance really gives a sense of unknown, and the mess of geometry makes identifying danger harder. It's not a hill I'm ready to die on, but there is value to quote-unquote PS1 graphics. Speaking of which, I am impressed with how far BloodBorne PSX sticks to its premise. Normally with 2D homages, people will say that it looks like a NES game, but they couldn't be more wrong. Very often there is a lot of colors that couldn't be possible, or there's too much pixels on screen, or it's clearly digitized. It's subtle at first, just like the album cover to the fake band in Guardians of the Galaxy. You can tell that the same tools weren't used. It looks too clean as a result. The game also has a myriad of visual artifacts that exist on CRT. They could have just thrown a filter, but they even added screen jumping, color tornado, and tracking density, the white dots on VHS movies. There's dozen more of these effects, but what's also impressive is the translation of gameplay. Everything works within the limits of how such a system would behave, for the most part. Certain things would probably be FMVs, like the werewolf at the start, but it's a more believable recreation. There's even a slowdown to simulate the system memory limitation, and the FPS counter can be set to 20 to 30 FPS, which is how a game would run in that era with a couple of exceptions. The menus are now PS1 as ever, and the weapon switching has to be done in it, another limitation that would have been accurate for the era. Each item scrolls slowly. It's similar to Silent Hill 1. There's even Z-fighting on the textures. All the flaws are here. They don't even simulate lighting. Light is done through textures. Unlike a 2D game homage, this could actually play on PS1. Or, again, almost. Even without the filters, it doesn't look too neat. The illusion is not broken. When I reached the inside of the Reverie, I felt right at home. Unlike modern games that are infinitely vast, the cozy inside of a 32-bit level felt comfortable. It's amazing in hindsight what they could do in the past. Not every game was worthy of praise, but I'm really starting to like this 32-bit renaissance. I hope it's carried over into more genres. Games, like all art in their inception, are viewed as inferior to the last medium that preceded it. Even movies were not considered art, but people learned to appreciate it. Just like people appreciate black and white. Well, not really, just cinema hipsters. 32-bit graphics are being viewed as an integral part of the medium now, and for good reason.